All right. We are live. Welcome to Bringing Heaven to Earth, a podcast that unites wisdom keepers, healers, and inspirational leaders who are dedicated to elevating the consciousness of this planet. In this podcast, we will share stories of healing, transformation, and empowerment, encouraging one another to rise together. I'm Veronica Carrera. I'm founder of Opportunity Holistic Retreat in Costa Rica. And we're broadcasting live from here, from the Pacific coast of beautiful Costa Rica. As you can see, I have this amazing guest, John Jacob Mubarak. Let me just say a few words about you, John, before you introduce yourself a little bit more. But John Jacob is an Agape licensed spiritual therapist, a TEDx speaker, retreat leader, and author of the upcoming book, I'm Becoming, which expands on the core message of his TEDx talk, Don't Fix Yourself, Just and Become. I heard a little bit about your talk, which was in France. That was phenomenal that you got to be there, and all the people that got to experience your greatness. So thank you so much for being here, John.
Oh, what an honor. Thank you, Vero. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you.
So great to have you. So let's get right to it. The name of this podcast is Bringing Heaven to Earth. That is a concept, and for some people they feel like it sounds religious, or perhaps I don't know how I can relate that to us, to the day to day, or who I am as a human being in this world. So talk to me from your perspective. What does it mean to bring heaven to earth?
Yes. Well, hmm, in so much of my understanding and the way that I can access some of these greater spiritual truths is through science, right? Because what is science? Science is an attempt to describe nature, an attempt to understand the laws of nature. And that's really what science is at a very base level. And 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 I think we could say also in the same breath that life, capital L life, is nature. Nature is life. And we could also say that this concept of the divine is life itself, that there's an order that exists. Let me just I'm getting off track. Bringing heaven to earth in a spirit, in a religious context. There's this place called heaven. It's away from us, and we're here, and God is there, and that's the sort of religious separation, more of a dogmatic view. From a spiritual, metaphysical perspective, we might call heaven the realm of infinite potential and infinite possibility. And this pairs very closely to what quantum physics might call the unified field. For in quantum physics, the unified field is this field of infinite potential, infinite possibility. All things exist, all possibilities exist in this field. Well, for me, that's the mind of God. If you want to call something the mind of God, it is a field of consciousness that contains all potentiality and all possibility. So for me, I'll call that heaven, right? And from a different perspective, let's just call it heaven. We could call it the unified field. And in that unified field, all possibilities exist. And yet there is one possibility named Veronica Carrera that took form and became, from a possibility became a form. There's another called John Jacob Mubarak, a potentiality that took form. And so all possibilities exist. We are an individualized expression of this unified field. Just like the wave is an individual expression of the ocean. It's never separate from the ocean, but it's an individual expression it arises out of and comes back to. The sunbeam is another example. A sunbeam is an expression of the sun. It's never separate from the sun, but it emerges from the sun. So we weren't created. We emerged from a field of consciousness. Now, bringing heaven to earth let's overlay that with quantum physics, bringing a potentiality into form, bringing a potential into the material world. This is what we call creation, right? And the spiritual principle is that consciousness precedes form. It has to be held in our consciousness, in our awareness, before we can experience it in the material world, right? And so when you say, I'm bringing heaven to earth, to me, it is this idea that we are the creators of our own life experience, and that there are infinite potentials, infinite possibilities for each of our lives, and that our job is to catch the vision of what is seeking to emerge through us, and to be an opening for that to emerge in the material world. So bringing heaven to earth is really being creators in our life experience, being authors in our life, that we bring the individualized potential, the true and good desire of our heart, into materialization. Just like Atatumi was an idea, it was in your mind, and then it took a lot to bring it into form. It's still crystallizing, but it's way more in form now than it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. This is the act of creation. And each of us are creators of our life experience. We create our life through our thoughts, our words, our actions, and our deeds. This is what bringing heaven to earth is to be an opening for the highest potential that we see to be made manifest, to come into the material world.
So you touch upon a point that relates to quantum physics. Let me ask you a follow-up question on that, because you talked about being creators and tapping into this infinite field of all possibilities. How, how does that relate then to bringing heaven to earth? Do we have many different possibilities, and there is one that is the highest possibility as creators?
So, I've really been interested in this lately, this idea that what we call divine order exists. That order, let's just say order and balance exist on the physical world. Any medical doctor, any biologist would say that all systems, and any engineer would say, all systems seek homeostasis, all systems seek balance and order and harmony. And so your question is there a particular? Yes, there is a order that already exists within you and within me and within everybody. Just like, Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith, the founder of Agape Spiritual Center, will use the example of the acorn and the oak tree, right? That the divine prototype of the oak tree is already in the acorn. It doesn't have to figure it out. It doesn't have to go, okay, what is my purpose? What should I be? No, it's already there. And when the conditions and circumstances are right, there's an activation that occurs in that seed, in that acorn, and then the expression of the oak tree. So the oak tree exists as a possibility in the acorn, exists as that the divine prototype's already there. And our job is to allow that to emerge as we create the right conditions. So yes, there is a perfect pattern of you and of me. And we don't have to create it. We don't have to figure it out. We don't have to make it happen. Creation happens through alignment. It doesn't happen through pressure or force.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we align with the natural order of life, the natural rhythms of life, the moon cycles, the sun cycles, the nature, as we become more connected with these natural rhythms, we become more connected with the natural order that's already within us, that divine prototype. And now we're catching that thing that's already in us. There's, who we are becoming is already within us. We don't need to search for it outside. So yes, there is that divine idea, that perfect pattern of you and of me. And as we connect with it, as we align, it emerges. And that's a very feminine process of receptivity and emergence. And then the masculine, the analytical mind can take over once we catch that vision. Oh, now let's bring in all of the things that we need to do and the processes. Um, does that answer your question?
Beautiful. Yeah. So you touch upon this point that I have been sitting with, that we have to create the right conditions. And what does that mean in order for the highest probability to occur for that luminosity, right, of how we want to live our lives? And that makes me just think about what are the right conditions. Is our emotions, our thoughts, and you talk about alignment. Yeah, when we fall into alignment, then there is an unfolding, a natural unfolding, as the acorn naturally starts sprouting into this oak tree, right? Just because of that alignment, it allows creation to happen and to flow naturally.
Yes. And so how do we do that as individuals, right? It's the patterns in the oak tree, but how do we find that pattern in us? Is that your question?
No, basically is just affirming or just expanding on the thought that for creation to unfold, for creation to happen, there is a responsibility as creators of what it is, how do we, what it is that is unfolding, and how do we create the right conditions for it to be created. Yeah,
The, yes. And for me, the right conditions are created when we unbecome,
with
when we decondition ourselves.
and so that gets me to your book, though,
Okay.
because yeah, and you did a tech talk, and I know I heard your tech talk before you went to France to give the speech, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is phenomenal. This is what he needs to be doing in the world. You are such an inspirational speaker, and I had the privilege of listening to the message of your talk. So I know I wasn't in France to listen to you talk, but I know this talk must have been so impactful for so many people. And you talk about unbecoming. Can you explain to the audience here what this means and why is it so essential for personal transformation?
Absolutely. Unbecoming is not about fixing ourselves, right? We have this idea that it's kind of the subtle uh, wink or nod of all self-help, all spirituality sort of says you're almost there, you're not quite there yet, and even though we say, oh, you're perfect, whole, and complete just as you are, there's a subtitle there that says, but you'll be even more perfect and complete tomorrow, right? In other words, there's something broken that needs to be fixed. There's something within us that if I could figure this out, then I'd be okay. And that is part of a deep conditioning in our culture. And it comes from a basic belief that we're not enough. And this goes way back even to Genesis in the Bible, right? Adam and Eve. Poor Eve. She was screwed before she took the first bite, right? Because she didn't have to take a bite of the apple because the snake said, eat this and you'll be better than you are now. You'll have knowledge that you don't have now. That was the beginning of the thought in Western culture that right now I'm not enough. There's something more that I need. Then we start to get this idea of there's a certain way to do it. There's a right way and a wrong way. And that really comes this idea of the normative should. And we get really caught up with this idea. Normative should is a measuring stick that says, I don't know, but a spiritual person should be like this. A business leader should be like that. A kind person should be like this. All of these ideas of how we should be, which is really about these categories that kind of exist but aren't created for our souls. So unbecoming is the process of observing the conditioning, the patterns that we've taken on out of protection in our lives that are it's discovering these patterns, and in the observation of these patterns, we remove the blocks that that inhibit clarity and ownership and creativity and presence. So unbecoming restores our inner authority, and decision making becomes clearer, boundaries become clearer, communications become more honest and less performative. Um, and 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 it really, so that's the beginning of unbecoming. And it started for me because we were in a mastermind. The whole idea of unbecoming came from a mastermind that we were in, you know, and it was like, we're all together and two of our dear friends are sharing about a project, right? And everybody's like, oh, that's so great, yeah, it's beautiful. And I, oh, that's so great, that's beautiful. But in my heart, there was a part of me that was like, that's not going to work. Who's going to go for that? Like, no, what are they even thinking? And I thought, well, that's not me. Like, spiritually, I want the best for my friends. Intellectually, I know that they're doing great and there's enough for everybody. But emotionally, there was a part of me that felt like I was being left behind. And so I sat with that and I looked at it. And when I stripped all the story away, like, oh, this was in a mastermind, and I just felt that there's a feeling. We all have it. There's a feeling, a vibration in our body. When we can strip the story away, there's a somatic feeling. And when I sat with that feeling took me back to being 6 years old and sitting. My sister was in her high school production of Oliver Twist, and my parents took me to see the play. And when the curtain rose, there was my sister and all of my little friends from school that were on stage playing the orphans. Apparently their older brothers and sisters told them how to be in the play and mine didn't, you know? And I remember being 6. Again, this isn't a villain origin story, right? This isn't like, oh my God, I was abused. But this is how it happens to all of us. We have an experience. That experience creates a feeling. The feeling was, I get left behind and people don't look out for me. Even though that wasn't the truth, I'm 6. And then that feeling becomes an identity, right? And this
In a
happens to
belief about yourself.
right. So we have an experience. That experience makes us feel, I get left behind. I'm not safe. I don't belong. I felt like that in this moment. And then what happens is that becomes our identity. I'm not safe. I get left behind. I don't belong. And we create all sorts of coping strategies, helpful strategies that protect us from feeling not enough, like we don't belong, like we're not lovable, like we're not worthy, like we're not safe. This is all subconscious. So unbecoming is the process of identifying that and releasing those old blocks so that we really can have emotional intelligence. And when we start, yeah, go ahead.
No, no, no. I love that. So I want us to pause here for a second because I want people to get this part, and because I think it's so powerful what you're teaching here through your talks, and especially through this book that is about to come out. Um, Unbecoming is recognizing those emotions or beliefs about ourselves that are holding us back, that are making us feel small, and those emotions that make us compare to others. And there's this competition about, am I more worthy than they are, or I don't want to be left behind. And therefore, instead of a union, we create separation.
Exactly. But the thing is that this isn't conscious, right? It's not like I didn't say, oh, I feel left behind. What happened is the nervous system in the body, when these things happen to us as kids, it gets seared into our nervous system because these early memories are stored in feelings, not in words. So it's like, do you remember touching a hot stove when you were a kid? Like the first time you touched a hot stove, you never had to touch a hot stove again, right? You learned instantly not to do that. Years later, even when you knew as an adult that stove is not hot, you hesitate before you touch it. The response is automatic. That's what happens with unbecoming, right? It's not like I sit there and go, it's the nervous system inside you goes, that's hot, be careful. Even though you know intellectually it's cold, it's not on.
So that's how trauma works, really. That's what you're referring to. Trauma is stored in our bodies, in our memories, in our subconscious field. And then as adults, it's just there. It
And we're
is almost
typically
alert, 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 alert.
Now, let me tell you something, because this audience that we're speaking to is a corporate audience to a great degree, right? So I want to tell you a quick story of how powerful this is, even in the most highly developed, highly successful individuals. One of my best friends for 40 plus years is the president of a large hospital system on the East Coast. One of the most brilliant people I know. She has a mission about changing healthcare, and she's doing amazing work. We took a vacation together went this summer, and we were driving, and we just had a moment. It was her and I were driving in the car, and there was a quick little kerfuffle, a quick little like, meh, a little fight about the GPS. It was like 30 seconds, right? We're both mature. We love each other. We've known each other for years. The GPS, we both kind of get defensive. And then 30 seconds later, we go, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Okay, yeah, that was great. And she said, I said to her, I'm working on this book called Unbecoming. And a lot of times these little things that seem like, oh, we just fought over the GPS, they actually have connections to deeper trauma. And she said, John, I've done a lot of work on myself. I'm not defensive in my life. I run large systems of individuals. I have thousands and thousands of employees, and I'm not defensive. I'm just tired. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, but if you want to share the process with me, that's okay. So we started to do the process of observing, feeling, asking, and then healing. Observe, feel, ask, heal is the unbecoming process. So we started. Let's go back to the moment when we were fighting about the GPS. Okay, can you feel what you were feeling in your body? Forget about the story and who was right. Just what did you feel in your body? She felt it. Okay, when's the first time or earliest time, or what is that associated with? What is that from? What age is that associated with? Bam. She was 8, 9, 10 years old. Her older brothers were torturing her. She felt unseen, unheard. And here we excavated this whole trauma that came from a silly little thing about the GPS. This is how it works. Even with highly evolved, highly intelligent individuals, we have these moments that cause a trigger, and then we just go over and think, oh, that's just the way I am, or I was just defensive, or I'm just tired. But really, those are breadcrumbs back to these initial traumas. And once we uncover those and accept them and the healing of it, here's the thing. Intellectually and spiritually, she knew all this stuff. Intellectually and spiritually, I knew I wanted the best for our friends in the mastermind. It's the emotional body. Our emotional body stores these in our body as somatic experiences, and they cause just like touching the hot stove, something happens. It's like a cue all the way back. We time travel back unconsciously and react from a somatic feeling based on a current situation.
Yeah. What did Carl Jung said until we make the subconscious conscious? Do you remember that quote?
Yes, we'll be basically on the. I can't remember exactly how he said it, but until we make the subconscious conscious, we will be on the strings. We'll be puppets on the strings of the
We will call
unconscious.
it fate. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
Yeah,
we'll call it faith. That's right.
yeah, and it's really just coming from a different place. I like how you explained about time travel back to that time. So why don't we dive in on your life, John? This whole process of transformation, and you as a phenomenal transformational coach, healer, in many ways. I mean, your presence in itself just helps people elevate. But I know that you have a story of yourself, meaning what has been your own process of transformation? What were your biggest challenges that led you to this moment of awakening?
You know, I have a different sense of, so people go, oh, talk about enlightenment, and it kind of makes me nervous, right? So, oh, one's enlightened and one isn't, or but I am certainly on the path of unbecoming, and unbecoming is this deconditioning and reclaiming my own authority. And so the milestones on my path have been just like what I expressed, right? There are these moments when um, I began to observe the way that I was responding to life and noticing that something did not resonate. It wasn't resonant. So some of the biggest moments of my life on my path, I started so long ago seeking something more. Back in the 90s, I did, the Landmark Forum, and
Yeah, I did that part too. Yes.
I became an introduction to the forum leader. I wasn't a forum leader. I was an introduction, right? Like introducing people to the forum where I became very involved with that. I loved the principles, but there was something missing. There was no spirit in it, you know? And then in 2008, I found agape. And that was a huge part of my growth and expansion as I began to realize that we are all individual expressions of this unified whole, and that our job is to remember our connection and to become a beneficial presence on the planet. But the
Mm.
way that this unfolding, this unbecoming has happened for me is in the moments, just like some of the moments I described, when little normal things in life pop up. And if we're attentive, life is always the curriculum. Can I give you one more short example of how this works? Uh,
Yes.
okay, I'll be really quick. I
Okay.
had, I had, I was facilitating a retreat with a co-facilitator, and it was a beautiful night of ancient modalities that we were working with. And people were seeing so much and having these beautiful visions and understandings. And so now, back in my jungle cabina after the evening, I was with my co-facilitator, and I just silly set like a glass of water on a counter that wasn't stable, and the counter and the water fell. I immediately said, "Oh God, that was stupid. I should have seen that wasn't going to work." You know, and my friend looked at me and said, "You're an experimenter." I thought he was speaking like Vulcan or something. I was like, "I'm a what?" He goes, "You're an experimenter. That's your genius. I've always seen you as someone who experiments, figures out what doesn't work and what works. Bumps into stuff, figures it out, and then wants to share it with other people so they don't bump into the same furniture you did. You're an experimenter." There was something in that moment that like reached into my nervous system, because my nervous system, just like we've been talking about, my emotional body, my nervous system didn't say, "Oh, experimenter." My emotional body said, "You should have known better." My emotional body said, "You should see around every corner with Jedi precision." And then I remembered my dad, my loving dad, doing the best he could, but he would say, "What were you thinking when I did something? What were you thinking?" I go, "Well, I didn't think." He goes, "Exactly. You weren't thinking. You should have known better."
You should
I
have known better. So
known better.
is that part of the thought that comes to your mind when
And it's the
now
way
it's like,
we
oh,
interpret it, right? The way I interpret it. My dad said whatever he said. I interpreted I should have known better as there's something wrong with me. And then anytime I did something that was a little it was like my nervous system went, "Oh, we got that. You should have known better. There's a giant file. Just put it over there in this huge file called you should have known better." And it was just more examples of how I wasn't quite as smart as other people. I wasn't quite as quick, and I didn't see things like other people did. A whole lifetime of this. And when my friend said, "You're an experimenter," it was like something reached into my nervous system and said, "Experimenter, not failure. Experimenter, not stupid. Experimenter, not should have known better." It was like my whole nervous system got reorganized with
shift
one.
the perspective. Shifting the perspective, really.
So now instead of "I should have known better," I say, "Well, that didn't work. That was an experiment that didn't work."
Yeah.
This is the process of unbecoming, it's the process of becoming sovereign as we begin to see the limiting narratives and I never walked around even realizing that I had this whole "you should have known better" story. It wasn't till a moment happened. Life is the curriculum. If we're attentive, if we observe, those moments in life are always showing us exactly where we want to heal. And
Life is the curriculum. I love that you have repeated that a few times. Life is the curriculum. this is what we're here to do. This is the place that we came to experiment
Yes.
and become, so that we can discover more the true essence of who we are.
And
And I
and
think
and
that's what you're talking about.
yes, and in the corporate world, this is not just a woo-woo spiritual practice, right? Leaders who unbecome lead from sovereignty, not approval. They don't need to dominate, right? They can hold the tension of conflict and uncertainty. Organizations don't need more motivation, they need more presence. They unbecoming creates cultures of responsibility instead of blame, cultures of curiosity instead of defense, and ownership instead of victimhood. And the result is, when we're doing this on our individual lives and in a corporate setting, better leadership, healthier teams, clearer decision, lower burnout, higher trust, more sustainable success. So it's not so much how do we get people to do more on an organizational level, but what happens when people are no longer carrying stuff that doesn't really belong to them.
You said it and explained it so well. And for someone like me who has spent most of my life as a leader in corporate America, I cannot tell you how much this resonates with me. Even now, as an executive coach, when people come to me and just for me to help them with whatever challenges they have, either in being a great salesperson, achieving their revenue results or the quarter results, all of this, what's unique or the twist that at first they may feel like, okay, is this how we're going to start coaching? I actually do not start with coaching them on the mechanics of sales. I actually tell them, let's go back. Let's try to identify where that limiting belief exists before we go into the mechanics of the
Yes.
knowledge of how do you become a successful salesperson, because it starts from within. And you are so spot on, because um, I'll tell you this: every time that I have done this with every person that I have coached, they have achieved massive success. If they were here in their revenue or financial resource, they went all the way up to here in just a matter of 3 months. And it wasn't primarily because I helped them with the mechanics of sales techniques or negotiations or communications. They all go back to the conversations that help them unblock something, help them identify where that child or the emotions of that child was still showing up as the adult, as the professional, feeling I'm not enough, I'm not as good as this other person. I may never be as good as this other person, or I have to lead with fear so people can respect me instead of lead with inspiration. And it all goes back to a moment, just as you explained, that made us believe something that is no longer working. And it doesn't work if you want to live a life of inspiration.
Amen. So powerful. Yes. It's so beautiful that you do that, because that is the truth for me, is that this awareness, as we start to become aware of the limiting beliefs, is exactly, the process is, we have an experience. It happens to everybody. It doesn't, it doesn't matter if you were abused and abandoned, or you just didn't get picked for kickball. It doesn't matter, because anywhere on that spectrum, the fundamental feelings of I don't belong, I'm not enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not safe. It's one of those
Yeah.
core wounds that gets instilled within us. And then we get crafty, right? At the level of a 6, 7, 8 year old, we do something really intelligent. We build armor
We
to
build an
protect,
armor, a
right? Well,
shield.
I'm never going to look stupid again, so I'm going to be hyper successful. I'm never going to feel like I don't belong again, so I'm going to become a people pleaser. I'm going to become a perfectionist. I'm going to become, right, controlling. These are things that everybody identifies with: control, perfectionism, people pleasing, no boundaries, codependency, hyper success, avoidance, hyper independence. All of these pieces come, and they're all responses to feelings of in our emotional body. So when we're talking about creation, intellectually and spiritually, we know stuff. We're in alignment. It's the emotional body, which is the work that you pointed to that you do with your clients. Before I'm talking about the mechanics of sales, let's get into the limiting belief. That's the emotional body. And as we start to excavate these limiting beliefs and rewrite the narratives, right? So I rewrite the narrative from I should have known better to, oh, that was an experiment that didn't work.
That's right.
Well, that
That's
didn't work.
And that leads me to the work that we do here. I mean, in here at Opportunity, then it goes beyond just being doing successful things in the corporate world, but now going inward. And this is the work that you do. You also host retreats. You also work for other healing or transformational centers, and you inspire so many people and facilitate a space for so many people to go through this process of transformation. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How is it that you help your clients now with that understanding that you have of no longer being the victims but becoming the creators? How do you help people through these spaces to become creators of their own lives?
Oh, thank you for that question. Uh, I, I do have the great privilege of teaching at two other uh, retreat centers here in Costa Rica. I'm just a couple hours north of you, I believe. North, right? I'm like 2 hours north of you.
Well,
And coming to visit soon. I can't wait to see your beautiful retreat center. God, it just looks so amazing. Um, but I offer also, in addition to the retreat centers that I teach at, I also have a group called the Spiritual Recalibration Circle. And this is a weekly gathering. And the price of admission, it is a subscription, but the promise that you have to make is that you agree to meditate twice a day. So that's the like ground floor. So it's really a group for spiritual practice and stabilization and integration. And we do somatic practices and have themes throughout the month. And it's really a beautiful community for stabilizing spiritual practice. And so many of the people that are in the group after a year have been telling me they've never had such a stable spiritual practice. The community, the group, the mantras, the breath work, the meditation are all impacting their lives. So Spiritual Recalibration Circle is one way. I also see clients individually in one-on-one settings. And I have this beautiful half-day retreat coming up online. It's a live half-day retreat on Saturday the 24th. It's really very much about what we've been talking about. It's, setting intentions for the new year. But instead of this process of, I used to have all my intentions done by, within the first few days of January, probably the end of December. All right, before we get to January 1st, I got to have this done. And this year it didn't feel right. It just didn't resonate with me. And it felt like January was more of a time of crystallization, a time of letting this past year settle. And now towards the end of January, I'm in this place of, okay, now things have settled, things have sort of crystallized, and now something's emerging on. Now I feel like I can really speak my intention for 2026. So I'm hosting this online retreat. It's 3 hours, Saturday the 24th, from 11 to I'm sorry, from 10 to 1 Pacific time, or 1 to 3 Eastern time.
Yeah, wonderful. And I have witnessed you facilitating these spaces of transformation. And I told you once, and I'll tell you again, that you are so gifted. I mean, you have this magnificent gift. I mean, you are one of the people that I feel that I learn from. So thank you so much, because I think this retreat and the spaces that you create are phenomenal. And we can't wait to have you here also, to be able to add your energy to everything that we're doing here at Opportunity as well. So let me go to one of our, I guess, our last question, because I think it's important with everything that is happening in the world.
Hmm.
Um, I take a deep breath. I almost try to, I want to be informed. I check social media. Sometimes I feel like, oh my gosh, is it this bad? And I check in with my friends. I call them. And there are moments that I fall into these emotions of feeling disheartened
Mm-hmm.
and desperation. But I know that we are in a space where we sit with this immense hope for the world, where we are anchored in the light of the divine, where we have the certainty that at the end, light will always dispel all darkness. And that's what we are bringing through the spaces. We are just facilitating a space for people to connect back to their own light, for us to connect back to the light of the Creator. And that's why I decided to build Letter 20, because
Mm-hmm.
I wanted people to experience what it feels to remember who they truly are, and reconnect with the light of the Creator. So we're talking about bringing heaven to earth. What does that? How do people do that, John Jacob? And on your side, I mean, with all the knowledge and all the wisdom that you have, how can people connect to that? The whole concept of bringing heaven to earth.
You know, I'm still working. I work with that all the time, uh, especially connecting with the news cycle, wanting to be informed, um, and then feeling it's easy to feel either depending on what side of the political spectrum you're on. You're either enlivened and bolstered, or you're in despair. You know, uh, today is Martin Luther King. Well, I don't know if it still is, but it used to be
Yes,
Martin.
yes. Martin Luther King Day.
Yes,
Thank you
today is
for
Martin
mentioning
Luther King,
this.
and he is one of the best examples of this. You know, Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela both hold, and
Oh,
I'm not saying that we have to be Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela, but they provide an example for how to navigate a world where everything seems to be uh, like impossible for things to change, right? It seems like impossible. Apartheid was impossible. The pre-Civil Rights Act stuff was impossible. People were losing their lives, you know? And what did these men do? They held a vision. They held a
mm,
vision. Martin Luther King gave his dream. I have a dream that we are all together. He would tell his people, to protest, to be a protester. He trained you, and you could not overreact. If you were reactive, if you lost your temper, you stayed in the office. You had to be completely grounded and centered to go out and protest. And he said, listen, if we are victorious, the people that we are protesting against will be our neighbors. That's our true victory. So there's this idea of holding a vision independent of circumstance and condition. So the circumstances and conditions can seem dire. We need to connect and observe. We need to be we need to not get over consumed by the news cycle, but find our information, step outside of our echo chambers. But really, really, the best thing that we can do is connect with all sorts of individuals, to be that presence that says, in spite of our differences, we have more in common, to find our shared humanity in us. We have to, when I feel that anger coming up inside of me because I disagree with something, wholeheartedly, I can't suppress it. I can't spiritually bypass and go, oh, everything's unfolding in divine perfection and everything's going to be okay. No, I have to honor that part of
Yeah.
myself that says, this is really scary for me. And okay, now I'm holding the vision. I have to clean up this thing in me that sees another as an enemy, that sees otherness, that sees opposition. You know, Mother Teresa was asked to march in a anti-war demonstration and she refused. She said, I'm not going to be against anything, but if you have a pro-peace rally, I'll go. So these are the steps, right? That we, not that I know the answer, but this is what I'm clinging to. Find love in my heart. Be at peace in my heart. When I interact with people that have different opinions than me, find our shared humanity. Find connection. Be an opening. You want to talk about bringing heaven to earth? Let me be an opening for peace to come in. When you show up in a meeting, peace shows up. When you show up, love shows up. When you show up, compassion shows up. When you show up, shared humanity shows up. This is how we do it. One breath, one handshake, one connection at a time. And most importantly, keeping our inner landscape clean, not denying that something upsets us, but allowing it to be, and then coming back to a place of finding that unity, oneness, seeing the face of God in everybody. I'll put a period on it there because I could go on, but.
Very powerful. We could even pause here just to absorb all of the beautiful wisdom that just came through you. And you reminded me of this quote from Martin Luther King that says, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can. Only light can drive out darkness. So it's exactly what you're saying. And this is something that we are all sitting with. And like you said, it starts from within. How do we bring the qualities of heaven within? How do we find a place of love and light and unity so that wherever we show up, that's what people feel in the field because of our very presence. And that's the work. That's the work, my friend. Thank you for joining this podcast. It's a very important time in history. And it's a very important it's a very important conversation. And you talk about a dream. We just have to stay grounded in the dream. So I want you to leave us with some last words. What's your dream? What's John Jacob's dream?
Let me just pause for a moment. In Hindu mythology, there is a god, Indra. He's a thunder god. And the story is that Indra lives on this high mountain, and he cast his net from this mountain across the entire universe. Think about it like a spider web all over the universe, all these intersections, right? And at each intersection of that web is a jewel. And each of those jewels is a human soul. This is the Hindu mythology. And when we do the work that you're doing, that I'm doing, when we unbecome, when we examine our limiting beliefs, when we work to find love for ourselves and peace within ourselves so that we can see love and peace in the world, we're polishing our jewel. And when we polish our jewel, it doesn't take away from anybody else's jewel. And in fact, it reflects and reveals the brilliance of the other jewels around us.
That's beautiful.
So my dream is a whole net of polished jewels, amplifying and the beauty of all the other jewels around them. And I got a lot of polishing to do, girl.
Me too. Me too. It's an everyday work, and thank you for reminding us that the work is there. To become a luminescent, benevolent presence in this universe by polishing our own.
But let me say, this doesn't mean that we're doormats, right? Because there's
No.
love and there's law. The
Huh.
universe is loving and lawful, right?
Huh.
And so there's no, I don't believe in
There's a
karma.
dance there.
I don't believe in God, retribution, punishing you, but the law of gravity works all the time, right? It doesn't matter if you're a saint or a sinner, it's the law. It's a law. And there are spiritual principles that are laws. One of the spiritual principles is the universe is a mirror. It reflects back to us what we put in. So,
Yeah,
it's
that's exactly what you're talking about. There's a responsibility of being creators. What's coming from within, that's what you're gonna see on the outside.
and it's not just that we're like all kumbaya and love and just no. Martin Luther King Jr. led people. Nelson Mandela led people. There were things to do. It wasn't just, let me just sit in lotus position and meditate, but it came from an inner peace that then had inspired action
That's right.
in the world. So I'm
Inner
not,
peace that led to inspire action, even if that means protesting and elevating the voice or whatever that is. But it has to, I guess, has to be aligned to where that action is coming from what place that's coming from.
yes, yes, the come from, where we're coming from is so important. It's
Yeah.
everything. It's our energetic, and people feel that energy. If I'm coming
That's right.
from,
And that's why people follow this type of leaders because it appeals to the highest expression of their humanity. It appeals to the light within them. And I want to follow that light because it reminded me of my own light. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing in these spaces. That's how we're contributing with our drop of love and light to the world with the spaces and you create, John Jacob, with the spaces that we create here at Opportunity. That's our contribution of love and light and truth in this world. Thank you for
yes,
being you. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for being just extraordinary.
I
It's
love
been
you, Vero.
so
Thank you.
wonderful to be in this podcast with you. It's an honor. Thank you.
I'm so grateful. Thank you for being extraordinary. You brilliant, beautiful, powerful individual. Thank you for the invitation. I'm so honored. And I look forward to being with you very soon.
Yeah, I'll see you soon here at Opportunity. Thank you.
Excellent. Bye bye.